Hello everybody, welcome to another video. This is Jolyon Lockett and myself, James Griffiths, back for another instalment. So without further ado, I have only a very vague idea as to what's on the agenda, so over to you. What is today's topic?
I thought we'd discuss cassettes, specifically factory records cassettes. Because I'm quite a devotee of factory records for reasons that we'll probably arrive at presently.
Can we just stop really quickly? Can you just explain who and what is factory?
Factory Records was a record label set up in 1978 in Manchester by a group of people, a very disparate group of people, but most importantly, most well known, a fellow called Anthony Wilson, who was a local in this area TV host. So one day on my lunch hour from school, I was down in Blackburn Town Centre, and I went into Ready's record store, and I saw,
So it looks like a kind of an old Charles Dickens novel, I'd say, or some sort of literary artefact, rather than a musical.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's, I mean, to say the least, enigmatic, isn't it? So if you just hold it still there, you can just see that you've got Joy Division still Fact 40, and that's all the information that this contains.
Okay.
It just says Fact 40 on the end.
So this is a Joy Division cassette release.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. So yes.
And there they are, the two cassettes inside.
Just kind of hold them up and let's have a darn good look at those. Right. So, is this Joy Division's first ever release?
No.
Right.
If we're going to go to Joy Division, it's probably going to be a two-part video. If we're going to Joy Division's first ever release,
Can I sniff this?
of course you can.
I have to sniff old artefacts. My viewers know this already, don't they? Okay. If you just carry on. And
Okay.
It's got a complex
Complex aroma.
bouquet on that one.
Remind myself. Probably smells of all the houses I've ever lived in and cigar smoke and damp. Because unfortunately, I must admit, these boxes are not in prime condition. So, as I said, I purchased this in my lunch hour from school when I was about 15 or 16 or something. I saw it. I didn't know anything about it apart from I'd seen the words Joy Division scratched into the desk at school. That might be an interesting place to start. And also, aesthetically fascinating because of its design. So, I took this home, put it onto my Walkman, had a listen to it, and it's half of it is studio outtakes from the recording of the various Factory Martin Hannett productions that they made, and the other half of it is a live album, mostly from their final performance at the University of Birmingham Student Union in April of 1980. The first track is a track called Exercise 1, which starts with a prolonged squall of feedback and then a sort of driving bass and guitar drum introduction, which I thought was amazing actually when I eventually got around to listening to it properly. Because as I said, I listened to it once through and I thought, this is awful, the tape's playing at the wrong speed.
Like John Peel territory.
Yeah. You know, it's the batteries are going in my Walkman, so I changed the batteries and it still did exactly the same thing. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've wasted my hard-earned paper round money on
We
this.
all have to go through that experience, I think. I mean, you know, from the old days, that thing about, oh my God, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
I think that's like, sorry, this is a huge digression. I'll keep it really short. I think that has been lost, that kind of element of, you know, because nowadays people seek out music on Bandcamp, they try and find something which immediately appeals to them, and then they buy it, and then that conforms to the taste which they know they've got, and it's all very smooth. Whereas you're talking about a period, quite a different period, where you would stumble upon something, and your first reaction to it actually might be one of total revulsion, quickly followed by absolute adoration. Or perhaps a slow process.
A week or two later.
After a few drinks and a few...
It was basically, I had 3 or 4 other cassettes that I listened to, so I couldn't afford to get any more, so it was either listen to this or not listen to anything.
I mean, you were stuck with it, so therefore you had to work at it.
And also, because of the enigmatic nature of the packaging and the lack of general information, lack of any internet or such like, you know... Any information about the band came about as word of mouth. So unfolding the story of Joy Division was also an exciting thing, because it is a fascinating story. There's not a lot of information on there, is there?
No, not at all.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to Joy Division, and after a couple of weeks and a couple of lessons and a couple of stories that I'd heard from schoolmates and from digging about in old copies of the NME that were in the school library and such.
Your school had copies of the NME?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
That's good. I'm impressed.
I
didn't see a copy of the NME until I was about 32.
Really?
I was from Wales.
Okay. Well, there we are. The completely bleak vocal landscape that's created is mirrored perfectly by the completely bleak musical landscape. These sparse guitar parts, these driving drums. I think Stephen Morris is one of the best drummers.
Very, very mathematical and
precise.
Now, I think I'm right in thinking that they were quite influenced by German progressive, krautrock. So we're talking
much.
Jackie Liebezit, Can, mathematical, very precise drum rhythms.
Yeah.
But also very influenced by things like Iggy and the Stooges.
Yes.
David Bowie, the Berlin period. So a kind of mishmash of things, but resulting in quite a kind of cold and forbidding sound in a way.
Yeah, assisted in the early stages, at least, by Martin Hannett's production, and he started making these rack-mounted digital delay units, and also Tony Wilson paid for him to go into Strawberry Studios, which was 10cc Studios, and they had they had a basement full of these enormous reverb cabinets. But this is it's a room full of huge black boxes, which just made somehow reverb.
It's like that kind of old-fashioned thing where back in the 1970s a computer would fill a room of a place. It was like that kind of faux futuristic thing. So what you're saying is that it was a fairly random happening. He sort of happened to have these devices, or he just happened to have access to this technology, and it was thanks to that the sound was crafted.
Yeah, and a vision, I presume, as well, as to how to use it.
Yeah. Because Martin Hannett. I don't know a great deal about Martin Hannett, but my understanding is that he was a kind of maverick, eccentric, quite a troubled character, probably.
Yeah.
Who was kind of a visionary producer. So he was coming out of the great tradition of British producers, people like George Martin, and people who were able to craft sounds in the studio and actually make a studio version of whatever the band was offering, So because it was kind of his sound, wasn't it?
Yeah,
to an extent.
Yeah, when the stuff that he produced with anything that a band produced with Martin Hannett had the Martin Hannett sound. Early on, when his vision was pure and he was working to create this sound, particularly with Joy Division, and he did great work. It went off the boil a little bit as far as I'm concerned when he got into New Order. But he did do other good things with bands like what was that? ESG, which is a very peculiar band. I don't think I've ever heard of.
I've heard of MSG, the Michael Schenker group.
Oh, MSG.
And I've heard of ELP.
No.
But that's about as far as my knowledge goes.
I think ESG, if I remember rightly, the Scroggins sisters from Brooklyn, New York. There were 5 of them, I think. Anyway.
What, and their name was Scroggins?
Their name was Scroggins. And they produced a couple of singles which were released on Factory in the early 80s. Dance, I think, was one of them, and what was the other one was called?
I'm going to look these up and I'm going to put some pictures on the screen, because I suspect he's making all this up.
Anyway, they released these 2 singles. They were produced by Martin Hannett. They were released on Factory. They were licensed to a record label in New York as well. But they were discovered by Tony Wilson on one of his trips to New York in the early 80s. And yeah, Dance and the other, I wish I could remember the name of the other song. It's one of the most sampled records because it's got this fantastic beat on it. It's the most sampled in early hip-hop records.
Interesting.
So the Scroggins sisters reconvened in 1991 and released a record, something along the lines of samples don't, stealing our music for samples won't pay our way, or something, because they're a bit miffed about it, to be honest.
And so who would have been the drummer who played those?
One of the Scroggins sisters.
Oh, one of the Scroggins sisters was right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the plot thickens.
Yeah.
So they were quite a versatile group
in fact,
of
they were
curiously
great.
named sisters. Were they actually sisters, or
Yeah.
was it?
The bass player, one of them, I don't know the names of them. I mean, what look for ESG online, because the bass playing is just amazing, really funky, really
ESG.
out there. We should probably tell the story of Joy Division and their releases in chronological order as best as I can, which starts with this is a bootleg because very few copies of this actually exist. It's called An Ideal Beginning, and it was a self-produced EP of 4 tracks. Excuse me, I think it came in about 1977, and as you can see, it's under the title Warsaw, which was the original name of the band.
And you mentioned another name earlier when the camera fell on the ground.
Yeah, well, originally they were called the Stiff Kittens,
Right.
and I think they only appeared live as the Stiff Kittens once.
That is a terrible name. It's
It
almost
is.
as bad as the Scroggin Sisters.
But then they changed the name to Warsaw after the track Warsaw on the Low album by David Bowie,
Of course.
because they were, as I said, influenced by Bowie.
Yeah.
So this is some really scratchy, dreadful punk rock. It's not particularly exciting or listenable. It's not very well produced.
But Joy Division, post-punk band.
Initially a punk band.
Yeah, so they attended this really historically important punk gig in Manchester, the Free Trade Hall, where there were members of the Buzzcocks and Simply Red. Mick
Yeah.
Hucknall was there, great punk pioneer.
Sex Pistols played their first gig outside of London, I think it was, up in Manchester at the Free Trade Hall. And Glenn Matlock, the bass player from the Sex Pistols, was driving them up to Manchester, and they were late because Glenn Matlock didn't want to come up the M1 and the M6. He drove up the A6 so that he could pass through Matlock.
Is that true?
That's true.
But why?
Because it's called Glenn Matlock, and he wanted to go to Matlock.
Had you never been to Matlock?
No.
And history wonders why he was removed from the band.
Well, why was he removed from the band? Because he was the most talented member, apart from John
Yeah,
Lydon.
that's true. Yeah. Okay, so we've moved into Joy Division is now up and running. They've made a record, but it's not a very good one. It's pre Martin Hannett, so we don't have that kind of very sculpted sound yet.
No.
We have these members. Ian Curtis obviously needs no introduction. We've got Barney Rubble, Barney Sumner, Peter Peter Hooky, and Stevie Dale on drums.
Oh yeah, not the original drummer on
So
this
not
one.
the original.
Not Stephen Morris.
Not Stephen Morris, and maybe the camera was off when we were discussing. Stephen Morris was a very mathematical drummer that was on. It's okay, deja vu, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so what's next?
So they released another self-released track single after that called An Ideal for Living, which I don't have a copy of because I held one once when I was about 17 and it was for sale then for £100, and there's no way I was going to be buying that one, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So then they were approached by the Fast record label out of Edinburgh and contributed 2 tracks to this this compilation EP, which is Fast 9B Earcom.
So Fast Records out of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they produced, the 2 tracks appeared on this.
Interesting cover. What's this going on?
Someone climbing the Old Man of Hoy, I think.
Okay. And the other bands, Baz, I can't say that. Bazskax and Thursdays. I know that name, the Thursdays.
Tracks were produced by Martin Hannett.
Okay.
And
Do you want to show that inner? Because that's quite interesting.
Yeah. So there's the inner sleeve. I think you've got some sort of, I don't know if that's child soldiers of the Viet Cong or some South American militia group. And then you've got these other pictures on the other side of various oddness.
So they only had 2 songs on this?
Yeah, there are 2 songs on that.
Okay.
And this was released in early '79.
Okay.
Shortly before the release of... You have to carry on with that a bit.
Yeah. Just keep talking. I'll show you talk.
So that's that one. It didn't really go anywhere particularly. But yeah, Joy Division were discovered then by Tony Wilson and Alan Erasmus of Factory Records.
Okay.
Who weren't then Factory Records, but had a nightclub called Factory, which was in a dingy place called the Russell Club in Manchester, and they put on all the local post-punk outfits. So you get the Buzzcocks would play there, and Slaughter of the Dogs, Joy Division.
Durutti Column, or was that
Durutti Column would play there. The Fall played there. everyone you can think of magazine when they formed.
Harold DeVito.
The various founders of Factory Records, and they started releasing records, which is the first of which was this one, a Factory sample, Fac 2. So everything on Factory was given a number. Yeah. So this is a gatefold two 7-inch set. So there's 2 7-inch singles in there. They run at 33 RPM, and you've got 2 tracks per side.
A single running at 33.
Yeah. Just to confuse everybody.
Weird shit, man.
Yeah. And,
that is a bit strange. I've heard of 30 big records running at 45. Big records.
12-inch singles.
12-inch records. But I've never heard of a single playing at 33. That's quite unnatural. I think that would actually disturb me if I saw that.
This is the first release. It's got Joy Division on it. It's got the Durruti column on it, more of whom later.
Okay.
Then we have John Dowie, who's a comedian.
Yes, we've already talked about him, haven't we, off camera?
We haven't talked about him off camera. He contributes 3 tracks: Acne, Idiot, and Hitler's Liver.
So we had a thing about liver.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about John Dowie did this hilarious routine about how Preparation H was ever discovered, because Preparation H contains some kind of substance which is derived from a shark's liver. And the routine that he had was just basically some guy going down a beach with the most appalling hemorrhoids, and he sees a shark on the ground and just thinks, I think I'll shove its liver up my arse. The question being, how on earth would you ever... But anyway, yes, major digression. So yes, Durruti column and Cabaret Voltaire, who were from Sheffield.
They were, yeah. So they were one of the early glitchy pioneers of electronic music, and they contributed a couple of tracks onto this.
Oh, I love all this. Look at this. Chris, Mal and Richard used Revox B77, modified Akai and Sony tape machines, and EMS synth, customised voice synthesizer, the Dermotz Glockenspiel, Wern copycat echo unit, electric guitar and clarinet via various audio process units.
Wern, it's a WEM copycat.
Sorry,
I've got
WEM.
a WEM copycat echo unit.
WEM, yeah, you're right. It's a far cry from John Lennon rhythm guitar, Paul McCartney bass guitar, Ringo Starr.
Yeah, well,
Thomas the Tank Engine.
So, Joy Division get around to releasing their first album, paid for by a loan of £10,000 from Tony Wilson's mother.
Goodness me.
He was able to afford to record their first album, Unknown Pleasures. Now, this is not the iconic Unknown Pleasures album cover that we all know and love.
It does look a bit different to the usual. Oh, I'm going to open it up though and see what we have.
And then you get this. I don't know if that comes across, but that's a sort of silver embossed reproduction of the cover. And the original cover, obviously, the vinyl cover is on a black background with this in white. There's no track listing, there's no producer's name, there's no artist name. All we get is the legend, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures, Fact 10. Now, is that not going to pique your interest? Now, what on earth is going on there? Now, this is my favourite Joy Division record. It's got these fantastic sound effects of sort of urban industrial soundscapes of sort of empty mills being ransacked and bottles being thrown through windows. The sort of sounds that,
Do you mean they were sampled sounds, or they were actually created using instruments?
Created, they were sampled. They were, Martin Hannett would go and make the field recordings of these things and introduce them into the so you got rattling lifts and bottles being thrown around in huge empty mills and stuff.
Very northern.
Exactly. It's exactly the sort of stuff that we would have heard, presumably. And I used to break into all mills and throw stuff around.
Didn't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's the urban, that industrial decay that was around in the 70s and 80s.
It's like a full album cover, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You think of This Nation's Saving Grace, it has that kind of aesthetic, doesn't it? Very kind of grey and sombre and slightly menacing, probably.
Oh, yeah, very menacing. But it was the world that we inhabited, wasn't it, in the 80s, really? It was sort of... the wastelands were being created as a result of... She who will not be named. And
well, it was that kind of strange dichotomy, because on one level you had the 80s was very sort of flashy and glitzy and everybody wearing big sleeves, but then there was this kind of
It wasn't flashing glitzy
undercurrents
in the north, was it?
No, and certainly not in Wales.
No.
No.
Everything was closing down, and
Yeah.
And our happy afternoons were spent breaking into disused. I remember a disused hospital.
The thing is, it's so interesting because when I was growing up, all the music I liked was very escapist.
Uh-huh.
You know, I was really into Queen, which is about as far from this as you can probably get, really.
Yeah.
You know, bombastic, colourful, flamboyant show business, and I was into the Beatles. You know, colourful, love and peace. You know, kaleidoscopic, whatever. And here you were with a very austere, minimal aesthetic.
Yeah.
Quite different, quite kind of cold and
Well, to a certain extent,
gritty.
to a certain extent, it was a reaction to pop music of the time, because the chart music that was available, the chart music that I ever heard when I was going to school on the bus, and you heard Radio 2, or you saw Top of the Pops.
Duran Duran?
I quite liked Duran Duran, but it was pretty dreadful in the most part.
Which year are you talking about?
Well, all through the 70s and 80s, really. I couldn't really become fascinated by popular music. In retrospect, I've gone back and enjoyed these artists.
Right, but at the time they didn't seem to mean
But at
much
the time,
to you.
it just wasn't, making that connection to me. It didn't say anything to me about my life as someone.
So your life was just kind of a blank slate, kind of just stripped back,
Yeah.
minimal.
I think it reflected the experience of my life in a way that other music didn't. It was very directly reminiscent of experiences that I had.
I was just going to ask you: is the blankness of it? Does that invite you to kind of imaginatively project
Yes.
onto it whatever it is that you've got in your mind, rather than having that very colourful, flamboyant thing where you have album covers that don't leave anything? It's like that modern thing with CGI on children's films. It just leaves nothing to the imagination, whereas this is very stark, and you have to kind of bring something of yourself to it. Does that come close to nailing part of what you felt about this, or was it just the mystery and the enigma of it? And
Well, no, certainly that, because you had to imagine what was going on, and the aesthetic of the music matched the aesthetic of the packaging so perfectly, because again that was quite minimal and
yeah. I love that guy. It's so sort of workmanlike, isn't it, and sort of industrial and very anti-glamour in a way.
Well, if you look at this image here, if ever you've worked in a factory, that appears on the signs that say wear hearing protection. So if it's just lifted straight from the standard HMSO posters saying you are entering this area, you should now put plugs in.
Incredibly British, isn't it, really, as an aesthetic? Yeah.
The meanings that I had. Because I remember when I was a kid, cycling around listening to this on my Walkman and just being absolutely lost in the music. Enthralled by it and moved by it to huge extents.
That's what Johnny Marr always remembers. He was a completely different world. He used to ride around on his bike listening to T-Rex, and he said it was just like just being transported into another completely other world. Just like being plugged into something that was so imaginatively rich. He couldn't understand. He would look around him and he wouldn't be able to understand how anybody could survive without it. Which I think is something which anybody who loves music. There's always that kind of. I certainly look around me and I go, how on earth do people live without this stuff? Because it's so compelling and there's so many levels to get into. And this kind of stuff is, like I said, it's nothing like what I was into. But I can kind of see where you're coming from with it. I do like Joy Division now.
Yeah,
I probably do slightly prefer New Order. But
that's a perfectly sensible position to hold.
Yeah. They're quite forbidding. My take on Joy Division, it's a little bit like the first Doors album ends with the song. Is it The End?
Yes.
You don't really put it on to sort of. You come into your house and you think, I'll just put some music on. You pour yourself a glass of wine and you put this dark, terrifying song on about a child killing its mother. That's kind of how I feel about Joy Division. I have to be really in the mood, but it's very difficult to know what mood I would need to be in to put it on. I do listen to it, but it's often out of almost a sense of sort of morbid curiosity,
Yeah.
rather than wanting to be entertained or to groove away to something. So in the next instalment, we're going to be talking about Closer, the album, Joy Division's final album.
Yeah, Joy Division's final album.
Okay.
And there's a couple of other addenda to that as well.
And we'll look at more cassettes as well.
Yeah.
Right, okay then. Alright folks, I hope you've enjoyed the video. We shall return, and in the meantime, please leave some comments, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye bye.